be on heritage. It will look at, that question: what do we do in a post-crisis situation? How should we, how do we prioritize, heritage, culture? What comes first, post a crisis, post a war or a natural disaster? So again, we have distinguished panelists who will join us today, and it will be moderated by, I dropped that, Dr. Shahadat Oqan. Please, if you could join us on the floor with the team. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Round of applause, please. Thank you.
Good morning, friends. I'm pleased and honored to be here. We've had quite an interesting day yesterday and very educating and illuminating. I'm lucky to be working with three very distinguished implementers of protection of culture in post-conflict and post-trauma reconstruction and recovery. Our team is myself, Shahadat Khan. I am an architect and urban planner, and I dabble with cultural heritage as well. We have with us Mr. Paolo, who is the director of UNESCO's office in Baghdad. Quite a task, and Mabruk the position, actually. We have also our friend and an old hand in reconstruction in Mali, Mr. Ali Wild Sidi, who was a site manager for many years in Timbuktu, which has suffered extensive damage after armed conflict. On a different but similar category, we have with us Ms. Anne-Marie Fisch. She is the director of the National Museum in Beirut, and she has done wonders with her team to protect the objects and the heritage that was in the museum and suffered some damage and some loss during the civil war in the late 70s and the 80s. I would like to first start to, in general, just to talk about this idea of reconstruction and recovery of culture and cities of culture, and the trend that has been changing and developing over the last decade, I must say, with current problems the world over, whether cities and historic sites are suffering from natural disaster or conflict or some civil wars and so on and so forth. And we have to go back 70 years ago, over 70 years ago, when and why UNESCO was established. It was after the aftermath of World War II and the damage suffered by historic cities, historic sites, monuments, and so on in Europe. And the idea was to rebuild, recover, and reconstruct, and also deal with the communities, the education, the science, and so on. Many conventions and charters has been developed since. It has been changed, slightly revised, to cope with technology and advance in certain research and so on. But I would like to ask first myself and all of you whether 73 or 74 years ago, what was good then and worked beautifully, because you look at places like Berlin and in Japan, in Europe, like Warsaw and so on, that they have developed and included in the recovery of heritage and in the recovery of culture, cities of culture, historic sites. A lot of social development and economic development took place hand in hand. Now, in the last 10 years, especially in this region, we have multiple disasters, actually, in various fields. And many of the sites that have suffered are still suffering and still inaccessible. So what do? We wait until the war is finished, or we wait until the cyclone is gone, or whatever? Or do we need to start from now to prepare ourselves and maybe review all the charters and the convention and to see how these can cope with the increasing and more complex issues at hand? Agencies working on cultural heritage, led by UNESCO, obviously, and the advisory bodies of UNESCO, also World Bank and many of the state parties that have undergone in the past, especially in Europe, similar destruction and problems, they started a number or a series of meetings to discuss the strength and the weakness of what has been followed in the last 7 decades. And lately, a kind of position paper was published, prepared by, after long discussion and consultation, by the World Bank and UNESCO, which deals with what is called CURE, which is Culture in Cities, Reconstruction and Recovery. And this puts the focus on the people-oriented kind of approach, and also the policy-based and the physical-based kind of approach for the place itself. So we have the people and we have the container of the people. And it's quite an interesting and comprehensive document that I advise you all to, if you have time to read it, because it tries to integrate the two issues together and break away from the old static, which looks like static now, but I mean the old static standards and conventions and charters and so on that deal with outstanding universal value this, outstanding universal value that, and so on, and what do we do, and what kind of material do we use, traditional methodology for reconstruction, and so on. The socioeconomic dimension is becoming a focus also in any reconstruction or recovery implementation. And then there is also the document that included the recommendation from a meeting held in Warsaw last year, which also looked at the role of the community, the role of capacity building and preparedness, and engaging the community in the process of recovery and reconstruction. Having said that, I would like to take a moment to thank the organizers of this summit. And I was quite inspired by the introduction from the summit's MC, Mr. Mohammed Latabi, and His Excellency also Mr. Mohammed Limbarak, who said, we have to think more or less outside the box. We're here today to challenge the ideas, to challenge ourselves, to look back on our experience and what did we do right and what did we do wrong. And to help me do that, I would like first to introduce the 3 panelists who have worked and are still working in projects dealing with the recovery and post-war recovery, one which has almost been successfully achieved completely in Lebanon, in the National Museum, and also in Timbuktu, and the recovery and restoration and reconstruction of the mausoleums and the destroyed buildings. And more interestingly as well, I would say that we have a newcomer here, which is Iraq, Mosul, and Paulo is in charge of supervising the implementation of a project, an initiative taken by UNESCO, by the Director General of UNESCO, to revive the spirit of Mosul. With the word revive here, the Q is revive the community and revive the life, and revive and revitalize the physical components and the urban heritage. So when we try to weave the urban fabric, we have to weave also the various contradictory elements and different people and different communities. So I will start with asking Paolo. Just give us a brief about the project for revival of the spirit of Mosul, please.
Well, thanks for also the Emirates to inviting us to be here. I think it's a good opportunity to speak about Mosul and to speak about rehabilitation. I'm left with the big thing to be done, while my colleagues are maybe already a step forward. I was in Mosul again last week. Of course, it's a very difficult situation. I want to point out something from the outset. The Reviving the Spirit of Mosul initiative is not about buildings, it's about people. The entire discourse that you made before about Second World War and moving forward, bringing communities, bringing back to the communities their identity, their cultural identity, it's at the heart of what we want to do. The work we are trying to do is on two sides. On the one hand, there is, of course, the Emirates are an important partner in this. There is an aspect of heritage. There is the importance of bringing back what has been destroyed, voluntarily destroyed, and bring it back in order to give back to the community their identity, what has always been a mark of what they were. Mosul is a city of trade, it's a city of exchanges, it's a city of cultural mixity throughout the centuries, of intellectual discovery. And that's what we want to bring back. And it's so much what UNESCO is. I mean, UNESCO wants to facilitate people to talk to each other and to continue to talk to each other. So with the Emirates, it's really the focus is training people, but it's particularly really the rebuilding of heritage. But there is another aspect as well, which is not only done with Emirates, but other partners like the European Union and others. And it's the second aspect of reviving the spirit of Mosul, which is by rebuilding heritage, we want to put culture and heritage at the center of economic and social development. You were saying before, the static vision of culture as a number of conventions that we need to preserve. There is maybe a shift in sense, and there's a shift in UNESCO for sure. There's a shift outside in many partners, and I see that since I was in Afghanistan before, and then I went to Brussels, and now I'm back in Baghdad. What I see is a shift in understanding that culture and heritage can constitute engines for development. We can employ people. For example, we're thinking that through our project with all our partners, we're going to employ more than 3,000 people in Mosul, probably more than that. That means like 10 medium-sized enterprises opening up in Mosul in the next 2-3 years. I think that's good. That's a way of developing the city through culture and heritage. So I am pretty excited about the fact that we can do that. At the same time, I'm saddened because, of course, the fact that 73 years after, we're still talking about the fact that we need to reconstruct places destructed by war, and that our heritage is still a voluntarily target of destruction because it's heritage, because it represents culture. It is something we need to maybe discuss a little bit more about, and the idea of bringing humanity back to the city of Mosul, or bringing to the city of Lebanon or Timbuktu, bringing that spirit that makes human beings. I think it's an extremely important element of what we want to in development, and I think it's important that we discuss it here, maybe with our colleagues around this.
I need to follow up on the support of United Arab Emirates in this initiative. And the question is, why was a monument, namely the mosque and the minaret, why were they selected as the first pilot for the reconstruction and recovery? Was it because of its importance to the community, or was it because of the need to move fast before it deteriorates more? What was the reason behind selecting this particular project by UNESCO and the generous fund from the UAE?
Yeah, well, first of all, I can add that in the last couple of months, there's been an addition to the two monuments, and we actually have added the Al Tahir Church and the Church of the Tower as the two other elements constituting the spirit and the identity of the city of Mosul. Both of them still supported by the United Emirates. I think this is an important symbol as well, and we're talking about symbols, we're talking about the mixity and people from different cultures living together in the same place. That's really an important sign, as an important sign this forum organized here today. I think that the reason is very simple. We listen to the communities, and we listen to what they thought was really important when we talk about heritage. And of course, I mean, if you look at the notes, I have Iraqi money, and on the banknote of 1,000, there's the minaret of Al-Habda. If you look at the iconography of Iraq, that is a symbol of Iraq. So it is not difficult to imagine why it's there. It's been there for hundreds of years, and it represents that. And the mosque is another symbol. The two churches also represent what the community used to be. So it is talking to the communities that we decided to work on that. These are the symbols. But around that, we are also going to work in order to restore houses of normal people or public houses that can be used for institutional purposes in culture, but also in other, like schools or others. We're going to maintain the heritage. We would like to keep a part of Mosul what it used to be. It is going to be difficult, but if we did it for Dresden or Warsaw, we should do it for Mosul today. I think that's the whole point.
Thank you. Well, Ali will Sidi. Tell us about Timbuktu and your very interesting and exciting project that you were managing for many, many years.
Well, thanks. I've been a site manager in Timbuktu from 20 years, from 1993 to 2013. And after the destruction of Timbuktu, I got appointed as technical advisor to follow the reconstruction. When you talk about reconstruction, for me, reconstruction is a process, but that reconstruction is due first to destruction. That destruction might be a natural one, like a disaster, or due to human being. And in the case of Timbuktu, the northern part of Mali was occupied in 2012 by some people called so-called jihadists. So they come and they start to destroy the cultural heritage, which is a very sensitive point for local community. And when that has been done, because in Timbuktu we had 16 mausoleums and 3 main mosques, they constitute what's called the cultural Timbuktu good. And they destroyed 14 of the mausoleums, and 2 mosques were damaged. All of them are done with certain architecture.
That was targeted. It was on purpose.
Excuse me?
It was targeted.
Yeah, that was the target. The target was to destroy a very sensitive part of the local community so that you will have a kind of civilian war between communities. That's what their main objective. And now, how did we go to the reconstruction? We start to move ahead, and we said, now, before the World Heritage Committee inscribed Timbuktu on a World Heritage listing in danger, since destruction happened, the youth is not there anymore. I mean, the outstanding universal value of the mosque is not there anymore, integrity and authenticity. So what we need is to take our responsibility as state part of Mali and to inscribe Timbuktu and go on the World Heritage listing in danger. That's what we did in St. Petersburg. Another thing we had in St. Petersburg is to be supported by ambassadors of UNESCO. They organized an appeal to protect Timbuktu heritage. This is very important. Then we said, why not to go ahead and to ratify the second protocol of the 1954 Convention? Because we want to be under special protection. That's what we did. And once we did that, the Security Council moved ahead and they took a special resolution taking care of peace process, but also protecting cultural heritage in Mali. This is very important. And this is the first time the social, as a nation, the Security Council is taking this, is having this mandate, consisting of protecting cultural heritage. This is very important. Now, when talking about always reconstruction, we need to talk about the strategy, how we did it. We came up with a wide team. Inside that group, we have international experts and national experts. Then we went to Timbuktu to see the damage done by those people. And after the trip, we had several reviews. For some experts, we need to reconstruct, the historical monuments with the remains of the world by using local materials. That was the first group. A second group said, well, let's go ahead and doing the reconstruction of the remaining walls by using sustainable materials like cement and iron. We are not allowed to do that, since those sites have been recognized as World Heritage Sites. The 1972 Convention is not allowing us to do that. A third group said we need to go deeply and to know the history or the past of those historical buildings, to know their foundation, the material used, and also to reconstruct them as they were before. This is what's also recommended by the 1972 Convention. That's what we did, and we did it with the local community of Timbuktu, because we have in Timbuktu what are called the old architects, the Masons. They've been doing this job since the 14th century, because we had our first Eastern architecture mosque, the Jingarabel Mosque, in 1325, built by Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, an architect from Granada. Okay? So the Masons, they are well organized, and even nowadays in Timbuktu, each year, this corporation or association of Masons, they are organized, and the whole community of Timbuktu is coming to repair the mosque. It's a whole day. And that kind of traditional reparation is bringing people together. We will talk about this in the...
Thank you. Shall we move to museums now? And
okay.
Marianne, you would tell us, how did it all start? And it must have been difficult, because after many, many years of conflict and divisions within the Lebanese community, and there was a kind of, after the war stopped, there was a kind of denial that anything happened, and like life went back to normal. Only you thought differently at the museum, and you wanted to do something to document, to safeguard what was left, and also to leave a kind of evidence or reminder of what happened during that war. Could you tell us, please?
That's right. So the National Museum was very badly damaged during the war, namely between 1975 and 1991. The reason was because this museum was located at a very strategic location that was dividing at the time Beirut into two parts, east and west. So this was the Green Line. And the museum stood there like a bunker, I must say, for all the armies, the fighters, the different factions who took place and who lived inside the museum. So the museum was a living place for these people during many, many years. At the time, the director of antiquities was Maurice Chehab, and very quickly he decided to remove all the small pieces that were in the showcases, and he hid them in the basement of the museum, and then on kind of shelves that he walled. So nobody could ever tell that behind the walls, the whole collection was protected in this basement. And even though he walled the door of the basement, so nobody opened this basement for more than 15 years. Now, the big pieces that he couldn't move, of course, on the ground floor, many tons of sarcophagi, statues, and different artifacts. These pieces were kept as is on the ground floor, but then he built around each and every big object's walls that he put concrete on the top of it. So the image we had when we came inside this museum at the early 90s was like a surrealistic museum filled with big blocks of concrete blocks, big objects covered. We didn't even know what was hidden inside. Of course, he didn't leave any, and he passed away, unfortunately, at the time. The first challenge was, of course, to open the doors of the museum. And this is what we did, although it was very damaged. But we decided in 1993 that it was a good idea to open the doors, like in a special exhibition, to invite people who had suffered from this very strategic spot, and to open the doors and to tell them, come inside and come see what's left in our museum. Now, of course, we were quite sure that the collection was there, but we couldn't tell what had disappeared or what was really very badly damaged. So this first invitation to let people come in the museum and reconnect to their past was a fantastic initiative, and we had more than 10,000 people in the middle of the damage, in the middle of the destruction, just people coming inside and looking around and being reconnected to this, to their museum. Now today, within the tour, and of course, after all the years of rehabilitation and reconstruction, because we started in '95, thanks, of course, to the Ministry of Culture, but again, thanks to the National Heritage Foundation, who was able to have special funding from Lebanese people, from the diaspora, and from all over the world, I must say, who were able to start the reconstruction, the rehabilitation of the building, as well as the restoration of the collection. So this took a few years, and in 1999, we were able to open 2 floors, the ground floor and the first floor, while we had to wait until 2016 to open the basement finally. So 41 years after it was closed, the National Museum within its 3 floors was opened. Now today there is a special message, because within the guided tour that we do usually in the museum to show the artifacts and to tell the story of this National Museum, there's a movie called Revival. And this movie is a documentary video that is a 12 minutes video that was done since the beginning, while the museum was damaged and destructed. And so people today can sit and see the damages, the whole process of the reconstruction, and until the result, and the museum open today as it is in its 3 floors.
Well, this is quite an amazing description of what happened, and I find it, and I'm sure many would who are listening to you today, the spontaneous reaction from the community to the loss of their identity through the objects in the museum and the museum building itself. You said 10,000 people. The minute you've opened the doors, everybody went in just to touch and see what is left of this, in spite of all the fear and loss and personal tragedies that they all suffered. Still, there was this symbol, and the fact that the late director of the museum had taken it upon himself to protect in this quite creative and imaginative way. And that reminds me of what happened in Palmyra and in Syria in similar circumstances, where also the employees and part of the community who hid some of the treasures at the risking their lives, because it meant so much. It's like, you know, they are protecting or hiding their own kids. That is what it means to people, and this links with issues that was discussed yesterday. What does a culture or a cultural symbol mean to the community, and whether it's just an expression to say it's identity, it's our roots, it's that it's actually something almost organic within us. But I would like to go back to Mosul, which is now, which has now the advantage of the shift, as you said, and the change in looking at historic cities. I would like, looking from outside the box and an old practitioner myself, ask a question. And we discussed this yesterday, and I think I wonder in this day and age, and after what we have been through, and what experiences people had all over the world from natural or man-made disasters, are we as professionals, practitioners, architects, engineers, archaeologists, curators, whatever, are we really equipped to deal with the size and complexity of the post-conflict or post-disaster? Is it our job only, or do we have also to learn from past experience and see that we have to involve others? Now, we're talking about a historic city like Mosul, like Halab. I'm talking in a different way, like Hebron, Jerusalem, all areas that has political conflict or armed conflict or civil war or tsunamis or whatever. These historic sites, or even World Heritage sites, they're somebody's home. You know, it's where they were born, where they were brought up, where they played in its alleyways, they went to school, they had their meals, then they got married and so on and so forth. And this is a place where they bought their stuff, where they sold stuff to people. And it's not only the beautiful facades and the actual quaint architectural details, but it's a living city. And all of a sudden, they lose it all. It's not only the house that was destroyed. It was like their dreams has been suspended. And all they think about for many years, like in Mosul for 5 years, in Aleppo longer, it's all they care about, just survival of themselves and their families and loved ones, and they forget about the material thing. And then when there is a kind of conclusion to the tragic situation, they are expected to plug in and go back, even if their home is gone, even if the school is no longer there, and even if they can't have running water or services. And do we, as professionals, are we qualified to deal with this? And do the conventions that we have now is ready, or it's still valid? I think it's more than shift that we need. And I think we have to deal with a new situation with the aid of the new technology that everybody's been talking about now, and we had a lot of about it yesterday. I think there should be more than a shift. There should be a revision of all the charters, Venice this and Nara that and whatever, and even the convention and the guidelines. Because when you deal with a living city, you deal with people. People built these cities. People created these masterpieces. And you can't ignore the fact that to make it survive or to sustain it, you have to bring them back, and you have to bring them back in good shape and condition. At the same time, you will also challenge those who are now talking within the shift you're talking about, and we're pleased it's happening. How do you expect the community to participate when they are so hurt and wounded? How do you expect that their involvement will heal them? Or is there something that should be prepared before you involve them, or directly or in parallel, to see if the young ones can get over the loss of parents or the loss of home and school, having been educated for many years, schools were no longer functioning. So how do you deal with this? And I'm sure architects and UNESCO are not supposed to do that. I don't think this is the responsibility. There should be other agencies.
I'm fine because I'm not an architect, so
Yeah.
I have no problem about that.
Yeah, we know, yeah.
I'm an international human rights lawyer by training, so I really have no stake in terms of my profession. Look, I see something, and this is the way I'm leading with this. I work for Unesco, which is an organization dealing with culture, heritage, and education. We are normally not the first one to respond to drama, or whether it's a tsunami or a war. But I've been working in pretty a number of post-conflict countries during my career, just because I think that you go where you're more useful. In this case, and during the years of my career, I think that, you know, it's good to have a shelter, it's good to have food, it's good to have water, but human beings are more than that. And I wish to remind us, maybe all, or maybe to pose this as a question to everybody, maybe nobody agrees with me, but I think that even after war, even after destruction, the spirit, the intellectual and spiritual and cultural part, that is the fact that we are human beings, is there. We cannot just be satisfied with the fact that we have enough water to drink. We still have what is part of us, what made us build Mosul, or made today build the Abu Dhabi Louvre, or you know, in the past I'm Italian, so I've seen quite some history in my own country. And you know, I say to some people, the other day I was walking, you know, they gave me this job and they appointed me to Iraq, and I felt like, well, this is really interesting because I can really go somewhere and help people to do something. And it's very clear that also our position is Mosul is of Iraqi people and of Moslawis. This is now becoming a UNESCO sanctuary. This is a city that has to go back. We are there to help. We're there to help, to do whatever they want. Other partners are with us, the Emirates and others, to help. But you know, I thought walking in my old city in Italy, my town, Lucca in Tuscany, really nice. I walk and thought like, oh, I'm going to Mosul now. You know, what are these people going to think about me? I'm going there and I'm telling them, oh, you can't go back into your house because, you know, this is a heritage, and which is not what I want to do. But I thought, if there's a war and my city is destroyed, and after thousands of years of history, all that I looked at for my life is not there anymore, and someone will come, whether it's the Emiratis or the Iraqis, they come and say, look, Paolo, we can help you restore, actually, that church that we've seen for centuries, the little you know, building that has been the mayor hall forever, and the little street that you were walking all your life, and your son has been walking to. I would be thankful, because I would think, yeah, please, maybe you're not giving me food, maybe you're not giving me shelter, but you're giving me who I am, my identity. The person I am, the person that generations before me have been, and the person the generation after me will be. And I think that it's part of what I think could be an important part. Let's not consider human being as just eating and drinking and needing a roof. Of course that's important, but we wouldn't be here today, we wouldn't be having this conversation, we wouldn't have built the world that we have outside this hall if we were just eating and drinking and sleeping. We do more than that. We are more than that, and we just are trying to say, let's discuss about who we are even after a disaster like that. Let's think about heritage as part of ourselves, but also heritage as a form for us to continue developing what we are. And as I said before, heritage and culture is also a form of investment in terms of jobs and possibility of creating opportunities for development.
Well, I would, because I think we're running out of time. Just tell us briefly, if you don't mind, what is it, what the local community, what was their role briefly in the process?
According to my experience as site manager, if you want to succeed in doing your job, you have to keep good relationship with the local community. Because it's the 5th C of the 1972 Convention. So for me, the local community has to be involved at every age of management of the sites, at the nomination stage, during the conservation, and even after that. So you cannot do anything without the local community. It's like someone, the owner of a house, you cannot enter in his house without him, okay?
Sure.
Without his permission. You know, those local communities, they've been taking care of their sites before modern nations, before nowadays. They've been taking care of them since the 14th, the 15th century, so they know them, okay? And I think the first mistake we did is the nomination way. But when we start to nominate those sites, we just take a decision from up, I mean from the national level. We just send a letter, okay, we want to write this site, without consulting or asking the local community. That's why sometimes we have problems. And now the process has changed. You cannot nominate a site without local community.
That's quite an achievement.
And now,
yeah.
we also get them involved in the reconstruction process, because all the reconstruction was done by Timbuktu Masons. And we respect also their traditions, like offering a common lunch or a common dinner. That also brings people together. And by doing reconstruction, we respect the traditions, and also we are doing what's called reconciliation. The common link, the social fabric are being reinforced in Timbuktu. Nowadays, our heritage has been reconstructed. Okay, a second part has to do with the manuscripts. Even those manuscripts, they are well treated, and we transfer them from Timbuktu to the capital city in Bamako.
Can I just stop you there, because I want your kind of input about the engagement of school children and community now in the museum, that you are facilitating visits and a kind of interaction and
yes.
educational activities.
That's right. As a national museum, I would say we have, of course, a big responsibility. So we are stressing today in our visit on 3 points, I would say. The first one is the memory. Of course, the museum is there to safeguard the whole collection of the past, but the memory also is this period of civil war. And so within the visit, with the children, we take them to a special room where there was, I will just give an example of this mosaic that was on the wall since the creation of the museum. And on this beautiful mosaic of the 5th century, a sniper just decided to have a hole in the lower part of the mosaic, because from this spot, this sniper could shoot at people trying to cross the museum, this green line that was just there. So this is a very strong image, and a very strong image of the memory of the museum, the memory of course, of our history, but also of a piece of the museum. So the children are particularly touched by this image of the sniper who didn't care about the artifact and the work of art, but he decided that from this spot he could better shoot from this angle at the people trying to cross Beirut. So yes, education through the object, through the memory, through the national identity, of course, because we are telling the whole history of Lebanon with different periods. Yeah. A feeling of belonging also that we're trying to create, and a strong feeling, of course.
It's quite fascinating, and I think, do we have time for questions?
That'd be fascinating. Yes, we will take some of your coffee time sort of minutes, but I think it's a discussion that I think can go on, but something we have been really moved by. So we've got 3 questions on this side, 1 over there. We'll start with this gentleman, please. Yes, thank you. And brief, please, yes.
عبد الرحيم العرجان مدير جاليري قدرات في الأردن. كثير مواقع في العالم سواء كانت خاصة أو عامة تتعرض لانتهاكات أو تدمير بشكل مفاجئ أو بشكل يكون في متوقع. هذه المواقع للأسف إنه ما بيكونش في عندهم أرشيف فوتوغرافي لهذه المواقع. الصورة الفوتوغرافية في الوقت الحالي بطلت تأخذ مساحة. لماذا لا يكون هناك بنك معلومات سواء كان على الإنترنت أو بنك دولي بيتولى حفظ هذه الصور سواء كانت لمواقع أو لمقتنيات. أنجزت كثير من التصوير في لمؤسسات خاصة وعامة. للأسف بعد تدميرها طلبوا مني الصور ليش ما يكون في عندهم هذا الشيء؟ احنا في جاليري قدرات تنبهنا لهذه المشكلة. عم نبني في الوقت الحالي موقع إلكتروني دولي لحفظ الصور الفوتوغرافية والمقتنيات.
I think we have, well, this is something that is coming with advancement in technology, and a lot of people have learned this lesson, but I hope that more. But maybe you could tell us, Anne-Marie, about, you know, did you get advantage of whatever was recorded when...
The problem in Lebanon is that even the documentation burned and was not there anymore. And a little bit like yesterday, what Alexander told us for the Museum of Rio. The documentation at the time was not as developed before the 70s. We had pictures, we had archives, but part of them burned, unfortunately, within the special part.
That makes the suggestion far more important. But I understand, Paulo, yesterday you said that there have been some documentation in Mosul.
I don't speak Arabic, but I'm getting from you that it's about documentation and
Oh, you don't speak Arabic?
No.
How come?
But I will. I guess I will soon. Because
you want me to give one word about documentation? This is very important because as far as Timbuktu is concerned, it is a World Heritage Site. And before being inscribed, you have to come up with a lot of documentation. Definitely. But the distraction also has helped us to improve our documentation, because before doing the reconstruction, we interview people like the Masons, the Imams, so the oral tradition. We use written sources, and we ask some people, we did also archaeological works. So based on all those sources, we come up to choose a strategy for the reconstruction.
Yeah. I think it's something that we can discuss further later. But I mean, did you manage to salvage anything in Mosul?
By the way, I'll do my little promo. At 2:30, I'm going to do a little presentation on what we're doing. And yes, the part of documentation is very important. So we have either 3D documentation, satellite and drone documentation, and of course we have the basic documentation of drawings, paintings, photographs, and archives. Because in order to rebuild, we need to know what was there before.
That's great. Okay, second.
The gentleman, the second question.
Hello, I am Ashraf Faqih. I am the head of communications and partnerships at King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture, ITRA, in Saudi Arabia. I would like to thank you for this inspiring session, which relates to what was said also yesterday. And based on the request from Mr. Mohammed al-Mubarak yesterday on proposing recommendations for next sessions, it's funny that we are relating crisis and conflicts with heritage. Crisis and conflicts actually are direct results of single-mindedness, this monocolor view of the world, us versus them, etc. Whereas heritage and heritage symbols are just the opposite of that. Heritage is a melting pot of different ethnicities, cultures, religions, in fact. And we, perhaps here in the region, are well aware of that. There are these big existential questions. What does it mean to be an Arab? What does it mean to be an Egyptian, etc.? With that being said, perhaps later on we can argue or discuss the concept of heritage and heritage symbols as symbols of a global culture, as opposed to being symbols of an Iraqi culture in Mosul, the museum in Beirut, Brazil, and what was mentioned about the disaster that took place last September. Heritage and culture as means of destroying virtual walls, as realizing the big human story, the single story that unites us, as opposed of dividing and building, again, virtual separations. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a contribution.
But thank you very much, definitely. Gentleman over here.
Yes, thank you very much to the panelists. My question is to Mr. Sidi Abdallah, Sidi more in particular, about the role of justice in the recovery. We know the case of the prosecution and condemnation of Mr. Ahmadi by the International Criminal Court. And I would like to hear from him what roles played this condemnation in the recovery besides the reconstruction of Timbuktu. Thanks.
Okay.
Heritage.
Okay. Well, the destruction of Timbuktu, as I said at the beginning, was done by some people, and among them Al-Mahdi has been identified. And he has already been condemned, I think, for 9 years, something like that. So this also has a social impact on Timbuktu local community. They get satisfied because, first of all, once the cultural heritage has been reconstructed, they found their dignity. And once Al-Faqi also has been condemned, they said that, okay, some part of the rights has been found. Okay? Now, concerning other parts of, how to change the life of victims, for example, that's not dealing with our field. That's not dealing with what we are doing. That is managed somewhere else. Okay, the social part of the crisis is managed by another ministry in charge of that. The social ministry is in charge of that, and justice also is charged of that. We are mainly in charge of the tangible heritage, how to reconstruct the tangible heritage, and also how to get local people involved and knowing the way to reconstruct in case of destruction, in case of damage. Okay?
Thank you. And just the last question.
Last question.
Hi, thank you very much. That was a beautiful presentation. I'm trained in first aid to cultural heritage in times of crisis, and I've got colleagues in Syria who are actively doing grassroots efforts to preserve their heritage while conflict is still taking place. Is there anything that the heritage community at large can do to help them with supplies, money, beyond satellite imagery, to help them with their efforts right now? And also, do you have any words of hope for them while they're trying to make their efforts during violent conflict?
I think the situation is still quite fluid, in my view, in Syria, as it is in Libya and other areas. But I'm sure many agencies, including Unesco and the Aga Khan and others, are trying from now to do some restoration in certain sites. And as for documentation, you recall that a number of local professionals and NGOs, Syrian, in Syria and in the diaspora, who have actually contributed to the documentation. But maybe UNESCO can, you know of more because you've been involved for...
Yeah, well, I don't know. In terms of what I did personally, for example, in 2016, we organized, when I was in Brussels, I organized a conference on Syria about cultural heritage and attack. A lot of the diaspora archaeologists and director of Historic Museum and Antiquities, they came. It was a good debate. He brought to the attention of the European Union and many stakeholders in Brussels what was happening in Syria. We had some cultural shows and a lot of performances. I think it's that kind of lobby is what an organization like ours can do in order to make people aware of what's going on. It was the time of Palmyra, the destruction that was really awful on television every day. Unfortunately, it was replaced by an even more awful situation in Mosul. It's as I said before, it's good to be here because we talk about the importance of culture and heritage. It's bad to be here again because it's another destruction of cultural heritage bringing us here. I think, in a way, Daesh has unified us in trying to understand that heritage is really part of what we are across the world. The entirety of World Heritage is World Heritage because the moment you accept that a site is World Heritage for UNESCO, it means that you renounce to it as your own culture, maybe as the gentleman was saying before, and it becomes the culture and the heritage of humanity, everybody. Everybody has it, everybody's entitled to that, and everybody has also responsibility to protect that. I think that's the entire strong message of what we believe heritage is at UNESCO. I think that's a really strong thing that,
yes.
that I'm sure that...
I would like to add something in terms of help and being there. So Lebanon was very active next to Syria in those times. And you know that now the Museum of Damascus is open again. But moreover, Lebanon was there for illicit trafficking, because as Lebanon was the closest neighbor to Syria, a lot of artifacts were caught on the territory. And we are very proud to have been able to catch the antiquities and to restitute them 2 times already to Syria, as we did also for Iraq. So between 2012 and 2014.
I would like to finish. Thank you all, and thank you for listening. Paolo, tell us about your workshop this afternoon.
Well, I'm going to make a presentation for about an hour and a half on... I mean, my presentation is going to be shorter. I hope you guys are going to be coming. Just going to discuss a little bit on what we are planning to do in Mosul. I'm going to show a little bit what Mosul looks like and what we hope Mosul will look like.
I hope we can continue the discussion this afternoon.
Yes, it will be
I trust many of you will attend.
My friends around here will be in the room as well.
We
can continue that.
Yeah.
Okay. Support
Thank you. Thank you so much.
A round of applause, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic discussion, absolutely. And we will continue the conversation.